Good morning. So I'm back to discuss player-facing games. What does player-facing mean? What is the difference for the GM and the player, and what is it really about? It's not just I get to roll all the dice, right, as the player, and as the GM, it's not just they get to roll all the dice. There's another thing here that I think is important. It's hugely important. And again, I'm not speaking about this as advice. I'm not telling people that this is what it is. And what I'm saying is this is my experience, and this is what I glean from it as a GM and as a player, especially luckily being able to enjoy Symbaroum with the guys. And I would say where I have failed utterly as a player in Symbaroum. Okay. And this would not have come to my thoughts if not for a simple question about one of the traits of my character in a Discord conversation. And then it struck me, we've not been playing Symbaroum 100% properly as a player-facing game. And again, this is just my opinion. These are observations and reflections. And again, this is part of my joy of the hobby, is trying to understand why I like what I like, and why I'm interested in the things, why I gravitate towards certain things. And I tend to like everything. It's kind of the big joke. I love what we do, but I also want those experiences to be different to some degree, right? And that's on me as much as it's on anyone else at the table. Matter of fact, it's on me, period. Okay. It is my responsibility, right? Okay. So I was thinking about this. So what does player facing mean? So my first real player facing experience was Lone Wolf adventure game with Elo and Jose. And I enjoyed it immensely because it was very simple. And what I loved about it was I was able to narrate and set these detailed narrative scenes and then leave it for them to tell me what they were going to do. And if there's something came up, all I had to do was, hey, you're going to have to make a hunting check here. Or, hey, you're going to have to make a combat check here against these monsters. But it was my very first experience really with a player-facing game. They roll everything, and all I do is create this environment, detailed, kind of setup or idea of story, or even God forbid, narrative thread. I think the first game we ever played, they were both young monks, or young, and they were going with a horse master to identify what was wrong with the horses. And they had to travel with this guy, and then they had to try to rectify what were wrong with all these horses, who was killing the king's breed of horses, special breed of horses. So yes, I had a mystery for them to deal with, so to speak. Okay. Hugely, but whether I did it really right or not, I don't know. I'd never really done it before. And again, we tend to be what we are. We tend to habitually GM over and over and over, no matter what the game system, the same way all the time. We tend to take for granted that everything is played like you've always played D&D or Marvel superheroes or whatever it is. And so we tend to get the same experience no matter what the rule set tells us. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why people don't come away from their experiences with different game systems going, yeah, I'm just going to keep playing D&D, because somebody played Savage Worlds just like Dungeons and Dragons. And so they really didn't get a Savage Worlds experience. What they got was the rules, which were foreign to them, but the exact same experience. And they were like, well, why would I mess with all this? I'd rather just play D&D, right? That's I think why most people don't come away going, now I know why I like Savage. Well, now I know why I want to play Savage Worlds, etc., etc. Okay. Again, observations. This is not true for everybody, right? And I'm not giving advice. I'm making observations. All right, get back to my point. What is a player-facing game? And why are we, I think, in many ways doing it wrong in Symbaroum to some degree? And that goes for me as a GM and a player. And I wouldn't be thinking this most likely if not for, well, let's put it this way, and the experiences I've had with my local group, the 6 sessions I ran, I now know for a fact, I took for granted player facing meant they roll all the dice. I look back now, it's like I was running Dungeons and Dragons, but they were just in charge of rolling everything. And I now look back, it's like, so what? That's, I mean, okay. I'm not hiding. I'm not making any hidden rolls. I'm not declaring. Let's roll a 1 die 4 and see if that you can see if there's a torch in here. That stuff's all arbitrary. I've said it before. It works for OSR. It works for old school D&D when you don't want to be the yes no man. But really, with Symbaroum, it's not at all the point, right? And I wonder how many people are running Symbaroum actually recognizing what player facing means. Or are they just running it as D&D, but they don't have to roll any dice? And this is where I've had this kind of epiphany, so to speak. So in our Discord, it hit me. One of my traits for my character is contacts. And I've now played tarot in I don't know how many sessions, quite a few sessions with Symbaroum. Matter of fact, I've been every session I've not run, I've played tarot in. So I don't know how many that is. I've run 3 sessions, so okay, 5. I think 5 or 6 sessions I've been able to play tarot. And again, player facing means we generate the reason to roll dice. That's the big difference. The player generates the reason to roll dice, as opposed to the player saying, can I see past the chains? And the GM says, I don't know. Let's go ahead and check your wisdom here. Make a wisdom check. And you roll the dice and your pass fell. And the GM says, yeah, you really can't. You rolled a 20. Dude, not only can you not, you're asking yourself, why did you even think you could? Right? Because we like to turn 20 into something that it isn't. It's a failed roll. It's nothing else. It's just a 20. It's the most extreme number on the dice that's a failure. Okay. If you're rolling under an attribute. Okay, so it hit me, and I thought, well, that's a good question. Who is my contact? So I looked it up quickly in the book, and it's not. The trait is at any time in the game, the player can suggest that they make a persuasion roll to recollect a contact that they can use as a tool in session to get information or whatever, right? And I thought, shit, I've played in 5 sessions. I haven't really had a reason for a contact to come up. There hasn't been like this moment where the GM has set us up in a situation where we're all going, oh man, how are we going to get through this? And my character would say, hey, I think I know a soldier over at the garrison, and rumor is he knows where we can find that. He knows where we can find that hole in the palisade walls of the old fort. And the GM would say, is that so? And I'd say, yeah, persuasion check. Yes. His name is Maximus Aramis, and he's a soldier that I've met and known in training, and I just happened to bump into a couple of taverns, and the GM says, okay, and so what do you want to do? Well, guys, I tell everybody at the party, hey, let's go talk to my soldier friend over at the garrison. See, now what I don't have control of is whether he's there or not. Is he there? Is he still stationed there? Is he on duty? Is he missing, right? The GM now, right? Then it becomes a GM says, well, you get over to the garrison and you ask around and, it's not there. And turns out that he was transferred to, Carrow's Fen, which is a 3-week journey, east. And you're like, damn, right? Doesn't have to be a guarantee. It creates conflict. It creates this thing. But the key to that scenario I just outlined is I am responsible for generating the trait. I'm responsible for activating the trait and generating the roll, right? It's my responsibility. We're not asking the GM, do I know anybody around here? Or, hey, locked on my character sheet is Bill. Well, Bill isn't here, Jason. Bill's in Detroit. Oh, that's right. I can't use Bill. That's a different kind of trait, contact trait in different games. I think like Blood and Bone has a contacts for some classes. But you have to actually identify them. You have to actually write them down. My old tribal chieftain back home. Well, they don't do you any good when you're, 400 miles north on an adventure. It won't do you any good to have the tribal chieftain contact, right? Okay. So player facing, I'm responsible for activating my stuff. And Dell, I was thinking about this. So who in our group has been really good at this? Because I have failed utterly to ever activate contacts. All my other traits and abilities, I purposely old school tarot. When I advance in level, I just add an exceptional attribute, which means I spend my experience points to improve my attribute scores because it is a roll under system. So I improved my cunning, and I improved my discreet, my sneaking, and I improved my vigilance. In my 3 level ups, I just improved everything 1 point. I don't have any of these tools and things that I can activate as a player-facing game, things that I can do. So how does this affect Symbaroum? Well, we're not doing it. If we're not doing it, if we're not looking, if we're not saying, hey, I'm going to use this ritual here right now, blah, 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 blah. The GM, you don't ask the GM, can I use my ritual? You're saying, I'm going to go ahead. And this, I was thinking about this. Dell has done this really well in all of our sessions. He's been really good at going into his ritual posture, describing that he drops into it, and he's going to fortune tell with Shig. He was really good at just doing it, announcing, I'm going to do this, and he dropped down and Dell's, I think Dell's really, I think Dell naturally folds toward player-facing, player agency games. I mean, it's just natural for Dell to want to be a character and do the thing, not ask questions, not ask, can I, Mother, may I do this? Mother, may I do my ritual now? Mother, may I have a contact here at Thistlefold? So player facing means the players take that responsibility, and therefore they have to take initiative, right? So what's the big experience for me growing up and experiencing even as an adult and an adult GM with adult gamers all over the world, online and here at home? What's the experience I've been getting with D&D? Passive players that are being told a story or being led, and then they wait for the DM to say, make a roll, or they wait for the DM to say, roll initiative, or they wait for the DM to say, oh, Jason, for you to do that, you're going to have to turn undead, make a turn undead roll. It's very passive, and it creates this world of passive players. And Scott and I have talked about this before, how difficult it is. I think when you're playing a game like Savage Worlds, which I have very little experience, so I can't really speak of Savage Worlds, but this thing that you're trying to draw players, you're trying to get players to take initiative. Go for it, damn it. Don't ask me, don't be passive, don't sit back, don't wait for me to tell you everything. But D&D is built that way. It's built to be, I think, a passive game where the dungeon master is the narrator, so to speak, and the players are the world. Everything is happening at the players versus the players happening at the thing. And I realize Symbaroum, I won't say I've run the sessions with the guys online incorrectly, but I tend to make a vigilance check. They'll say something, and they'll say, make that vigilance check, make that discreet check, and that's my job. I have to do that, especially when, let's say, something's sneaking up on them. You need to make a vigilance check here, right? That should be kind of a natural thing, is the worlds in a way occurring around them, right? That the play to find out worlds happening around them, therefore they don't know everything, et cetera, et cetera. But there are these moments where I realize, wow, context is a trait I'm responsible to use. I'm responsible to say, we're here in Thistlefold. Hey, I know a secretary over at the Queen's Legation, and she might be able to get us in and see the actual investigative reports that they've compiled about Rygel's ending of Blackmoor. I want to get to the answers to this. Now, what does that create for the GM? That creates a more open experience, right? It means the GM really can't prepare for that, right? The GM can't prepare that so the GM's going to have to be able to pull the pieces together and say, what do we learn? What would you learn from that investigation? Make a cunning check, et cetera. So that those things then would prompt the GM to give clues or to give away information, right? They go, and it turns out she's there, and she sneaks them in at night after everything's closed, and you rifle through these papers, and a couple of the characters make cunning checks to see if they can decipher quickly what's in this information. And the GM might ask them to make a couple of discreet checks to see if they make enough noise that the guards come looking, and so the game then is this conjunction of actions and responses. It's a call response mobile thing that looks and smells and walks and talks a lot like a traditional D20 D&D game, but it's not, right? It's not. So it's not just that for instance, the other night in our game, we're in the bar. It's a player-facing game. So once David defines the situation, we should be able to then dictate from there. So he says, hey, you come into the tavern. Malleus appears to be passed out, drunk, surrounded by tankards. It's crowded. It's raucous. Not easy to move around in here. And you see Herg eyeballing with his thugs Malleus on the other side of the tavern. That's the scene. We've set the scene. What are you doing? And I would say a player facing Taro is going to approach Herg, and I'm going to make him an offer. He shouldn't refuse. That would call up instantly a player facing role, right? Maybe I because I basically said I'm going to go persuade this guy, right? Or I'm going to use my resolution, whatever the GM decides is the appropriate, or I decide this is straight persuasion. I'm going to, and then I'm going to sweeten the pot by saying we'll pay whatever he owes, but I would make a persuasion check, right? It'd be that simple. And then that directs the next thing that David says. Well, because you failed your persuasion check, Herg is on his feet, right? It just seems to me that, again, player facing, we're supposed to, in a way, activate those checks, and that should then cue the GM in a response, give a call and response kind of thing. Maybe I'm completely wrong about that. I don't know, but I was thinking, it's like combat. We all know that combat works on initiative, right? We know who goes first has got the highest quickness, so to speak. So because we all know the rules, it should be very simple, right? It should be very simple for the GM to put it in order, or it should be very simple for the players to put the combat options in order. And because we're going to dictate the action, we're going to roll the dice to see if we attack successfully, etc. And the GM, of course, is at that point, in many ways, the GM is a player, right? I mean, the GM it is almost a shared. And again, this is probably why Symbaroum is easier probably in a tabletop forum versus a online, because you would ultimately, not that it requires maps and minis, but that there would be kind of this I'll say a switch into kind of the board game mechanics, right? The board game mechanics state my quickness is 15, and Dell says, yeah, mine's 13, and Todd says, yeah, mine's 12, and David says, well, the barbarian is 17, he goes first. And he stands up, flips the table, and swings a punch at you, and I would make a roll to dodge the punch or whatever, and then we act against their enemies accordingly, etc. And it works that way. Versus D&D, where we roll initiative, and then there is a kind of procedure, right? Unless the root version of D20 you're playing has different procedures, but most old school D&D games, certainly, I would think, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, Moldvay has an absolute procedure. OSE has this procedure. We very often hand wave away in our Joth games, which is fine. There's nothing, again, it doesn't break the game. It just makes the game easier to facilitate online, and probably even live at a table. But again, these procedures can be, for the most part, waived. What isn't waived is the DM is directing all the pawns, so to speak, or is directing your turn to go, right? My turn to go, your turn to go, make your turn. All right, now it's your turn, now it's your turn. So that would, of course, should hopefully happen in a way spontaneously in something that's player facing. If we're all abiding by the rules. Todd says, I want to do this thing. Whoa, Todd, you're actually third on the list, right? So you'll do that, but on your turn, so to speak, right? When we get to your turn, which again, a lot of people say, who cares, right? Well, it does create a particular experience that might save Todd the trouble of having to do a thing if what happens before that concludes the confrontation, or worse, makes the confrontation more interesting to Todd, because Todd's now dealing with the fact that Taro's been knocked out cold, unconscious on the ground by the giant barbarian. It might change what Todd wants to do right on that turn. But my point is, the gist of this whole video was, it hit me that I don't know if I've been playing a player-facing game as a player properly. And I know that we are in, say, Dark Age of Man, we do the naive narrator scene, right? I know my limits as a player. I know where I'm supposed to go. I know where I can basically activate the game. I know how much, in a way, I can facilitate my character's impact upon the moment, because that's how we designed it, because that's what we worked through when we invented this kind of, we didn't invent it, but as we explored it and discovered this style of gaming, which I don't pretend has never been invented before, because it has been probably, but for us it was the process. And then, of course, what is the role in Dark Age of Man for the GM? It is a particular, I have to be very careful to give a world that's grounded, that they can trust is not going to just change on them, but at the same time, leave the world, be naive enough about everything else that there are multiple ways the players can have agency to deal with a conflict or have agency to deal with a situation, right? Not railroaded into fight scene, not railroaded into sword fight, not railroaded into gambling with dice at the soldier's tent. Dell could walk in and choose to gamble with dice. He could choose to intimidate. He could choose to take physical action. He could choose to play act as a wounded. I mean, I want Dell's character to walk into the tent of the Vikings, and he could literally take in the data and choose how he wants to try to resolve this situation. It's not going to be it's time for the obligatory gambling dice check, right? Or intimidation check, or this bluff check, right? So this is part of the problem with games that have all those features, right? By doing that, by giving players bluff, intimidation, persuasion, the game is going to become about, I'm going to bluff here. I'm going to use my 52% bluff skill. And therefore, that's what they're doing. And it's simple game-wise. Everybody understands the probabilities, and everybody knows that he's activating a gamey thing called bluff, a 52% roll and below, modified by -10, because this guy is smart. And we make the roll, and we find out whether the bluff works or not. Now, some people will role play out the bluff, and then it's called upon, or some people will say, I want to make the bluff check, and then they'll role play out the bluff with the GM, and then they make the roll, right? Versus just role playing it out, and then making a dice check, etc. But so player facing, it strikes me as ultimately, I know now, outside of allowing the players to roll everything, I never roll a die in Symbaroum ever for any reason. Because it's not meant for the game is not designed for the GM to arbitrarily administer a random check in a game where the players are supposed to have a little more agency, right? But the GM could say, Joe says, hey, can I see in here? I don't have a torch. I don't have a lantern. How dark is it? And the GM hasn't really defined it yet, hasn't thought about it. And the GM says, let's go ahead and make a check here. You need to, obviously, you're going to make a roll against your attributes, not some arbitrary D6 check. Well, I don't know, is there a torch here? GM's free to facilitate the game any way he wants, but we end up with the same experience. Might as well be playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? Might as well be, why is this a player-facing game if everything is ultimately the GM deciding or rolling dice or deciding a thing? So it just struck me that I clearly didn't run it. I clearly didn't run it in a way demanding the players take initiative, right? Everything was player facing for the dice, but it really would have behooved me to not give them anything they don't take, right? If I don't use my contact traits to make the Thistlehold investigate or the Blackmoor murder investigation easier, David shouldn't necessarily give us anything. He'll have to give us something if we just take action. I'm going to go talk to this guy, and the conversation becomes a player-facing decision because I'm going to go talk to this guy, and then David can say, they've made an effort to talk to somebody, and now we might make some cunning checks and some mind checks or whatever, and we'll find out what you get from this. That's fine. That's player-facing. But I should have, in the Blackmoor investigation sessions, should have said, I have a contact here at the Blood Robes, and I want to go talk to him first and see what the actual authorities have learned about these murders, right? And then I would make a check, and say, yeah, it turns out that I do know this guy named Aramis, and Aramis is a Blood Robe, and he might let us sneak a peek, or at least he might tell us what they know about these murders that have been going on. Doesn't mean he's there, right? Again, David can literally determine, right, that my success that I actually have a contact doesn't mean the contact's available. The session can be about finding the contact, right? The GM now can say, right, but it's my job to do that. It's my job as the player to activate my contacts trait, right? It's Dell's job to activate his ritual of fortune telling, which he did great. It was Dell's job to say, I'm cursing this guy. And Dell would he would seamlessly narrate into Shig's utilization of speech, or of throwing scat or mud or feces, whatever it was, right? He would activate through this moment how he's activating his curse, right? There was not, okay, you need to make a curse check here, right? He would tell me he's doing curse. He wouldn't ask me, can I do my curse here, right? Jason, can I do my fortune telling ritual now? He would just narrate how he's getting into he's going through his machinations of it, and he's going into his meditative state, and he's on his knees, and I accuse me that he's doing his ritual. Sometimes in the busy game, he has to remind me I'm doing my fortune telling because I didn't hear it quite right, or I didn't quite decipher from his description exactly what he was doing. That's just communication. And that, I think, comes natural for Dell. It's not so natural for me. Of course, I haven't been a player as long for as many people. And player facing being a really, the gist of this video was, what is player facing doesn't mean just who rolls the dice. It also means the game is facing the players, and they are ultimately, in many ways, responding with taking initiative and responding in such a way that the GM then is shifting, is going to have to shift back and forth. It's like likened to mitt work in boxing. As a trainer, we would do mitt work for my clients to work on hand-eye coordination, and they just loved punching gloves, and they'd love to get out that aggression. But it was really good for their brain. It was really good for their hand-eye coordination. My older clients to do mitt work, but mitt work is a call and response, right? I move my hand, they hit it, right, or I stay there and they do all the hitting. The minute I move my hand, we're at a different phase of training. So with an athlete, right, I might respond back. But when I'm working with clients that do not do this, unless I want to end up getting punched in the chin because I move my hand and they're targeting here and I'm here, and they punch me in the chin, which has happened. You want to give them a target and you respond to their punches, right? Versus sparring, right, where they have to defend themselves as well as. So it seems to me player facing is holding up those mitts and letting the players punch at them, so to speak. Now you can move the mitts, right? You can challenge them once in a while with a swing over, right, that they're supposed to duck, right? Or, right, they're going to work on defense while I come at them all the time, right? It's definitely a dance, so to speak. So it just struck me, it's kind of fascinating. And I wasn't thinking about this at all. Reading the books and reading the rules, that doesn't always impart exactly how the game's supposed to be experienced, or it doesn't impart exactly how the players would have agency or choice or activate their player-facing mechanics. Player-facing doesn't just mean players make the roll. They take initiative. They should be activating. They should be saying, okay, I'm going to punch. I'm going to punch this guy in the nose, right? Are we in combat? The GM would decide whether we go into combat, but he might just say, make your accuracy check. This guy's a -5. He's quick on his feet. Matter of fact, he's up and so fast, you're kind of mid-punch thinking, oops, maybe I picked a fight with the wrong guy, and we roll the dice. And then, I miss. And, David or Dale, whoever's GMing it, says, yeah, he's up so fast on his feet, pushing the table into your waist and dodging your punch. And now he comes with both hands so fast and make a roll against your defense, -5. And suddenly I'm pummeled pop twice by this guy. And I realize, oops, I picked a fight with a guy superior to me, right? So, but I haven't really thought about it that way. And I certainly haven't played Symbaroum as a player that way. I wanted Tarot to be an old school character in that I was spending my points only on attributes for the die roll under system, not getting abilities, skills, feats, traits that I would activate. So therefore I haven't been thinking that way. But context is the one trait I have that I'm supposed to utilize in certain situations, and I never have. And it's not that we've had to, but I certainly, in both of David's sessions, I would have certainly had would have been wise for me to say, yeah, I know a guy here in Blackmore, and he happens to be the Blood Robes, and he might tell us what they've learned. Before we do anything else, I want to go find out what this. And then it's not even that we have to role play. We walk across Blackmore, over to the tent, role play out with Aramis. It's a simple dice roll. And David said, yeah, you do. You walk over there, you talk to Aramis, and Aramis says, listen, this is what we know, dude. There's a thing in its head, and the eyes have been removed, and dude, it's starting to pile up, and they don't seem to be any rhyme or reason. That's all we know, man. Get out of here. I can't tell you anymore. I get in trouble talking to you. And then we have a little bit of more information before we go to the next phase. Right, it can be that simple to arbitrate or to adjudicate, right? So I thought that was kind of fascinating, and I think Dell tends toward player facing. Dell tends toward, as a gamer, toward being taking initiative and just saying, I'm going to do this thing. And in some systems, the DM doesn't like that, right? There's times Dell's done this, and I ran something, and Dell picked up the dice and said, I'm going to roll to see if I. And I'm like, dude, I didn't ask you to do that. Don't, that ain't where we're going here, right? So, but that is something in Symbaroum we'd have to be aware of, right? That the players, in a way, they call out those things. And the GM might have to facilitate which attribute fits best this situation, etc. But kind of interesting. And again, I'm making it a bigger deal than it is. It's not that revolution. It's more of an evolutionary change in how we play, not a revolutionary change, right? It's an evolutionary change. That how does this very subtly empower me as a player to take the agency to say, I'm invoking my contact trait here. I know a woman who works at the Queen's Legation. She might be able to get us in after dark, and we could look over some of these papers that involve the investigation of Rigel and of my character's involvement. I would like to know what evidence they actually had before they brought. And so those things can happen. So player facing means also there would be an opportunity for Taro to even say, this is something I want to do before Taro leaves anywhere else, because Taro wants to resolve some of these internal conflicts. I'm not even thinking that way, right? But it would behoove me to think that way in a player facing game, to make Symbaroum, I think, closer to what they're so similar to it's so similar to D&D in many ways. But being a player facing game is not just who rolls the dice. It is who, in a way, takes initiative to implement their abilities, or to create a particular engagement that then becomes where is this woman at the Queen's Legation? Because you go there and they tell you that she's been, that she's on vacation, right? And now it's like, okay, we need to, what else can we do? Or can I find her? Does she leave town? Right. And we now have a quest where we're hunting around Thistlehold for this contact of mine, right? The session takes a turn we didn't anticipate, so to speak. Kind of interesting. I don't know. It's great fun. It's great fun. And it just made me think, wow, that's my responsibility as a player, to activate contacts. I never have. And I didn't even think that, I didn't even pay attention that it was on my character sheet. When I created Taro, I clearly put the contacts under traits on my character sheet, but I never even looked at it. And of course, I read the rules. I read what contacts were at the time. I just never, it was then out of mind, right? So as a player, my responsibility is to know what that tool is. How does that tool work? How can I implement it? And it makes Symbaroum different and better because I actually take initiative to utilize the things that make that would give us another direction to go, even in role playing, right? Because now I've created an NPC with a successful dice roll. Now, if I fail that dice roll, no, I don't know anybody here. Dang, right? But yeah, I do. I know somebody here, and her name is Sarah, and she works at the Queen's Legation, and right? Normally, it would be related, not to me inventing something I want to do. It would be related to something the GM has told us about the scene. There's a series of murders happening. I say, I know a guy over at Blood Robes. I'm pretty sure he's stationed here. Let's roll. Yep. And I want to ask him some questions quickly about and determine what they know about these murders. I don't get just to invent Sarah over at the Queen's Legation and go over there to investigate something that's unrelated to what the GM is doing. That's a different game. That's a completely different game. Creating something has nothing to do with what the GM has put in front of us. That's a different kind of player agency. Dark Age of Man will allow you to go there, right? Dark Age of Man would allow Vidar to distinctly set himself apart from the other two players and say, I'm going to recruit rebels against this lord, and I am going to lead a revolt. And I don't know, where that's going, but I'm looking right now to find sympathetic people who would follow me so I can overthrow this guy. These three chronicles could very well have been Brian and Ethelwald navigating what's happening in the world and their call and response. But at the same time, Vidar could have been actively working to build an army against Lord Washburn, right? And he doesn't know how that's going to go. Luck checks and conversation checks and being challenged and being, so Dark Age of Man does allow that, right? It is that open. It is quite literally Vidar's motivations and Ethelwald's motivations. The limitation is only on how do we implement it live here in context of the time and the space. But outside of where Vidar can take his desired motivations and actions, we don't know how it's going to turn out. We're not writing a story. He still has to act. He still has to actively achieve the things. But he would be free to pursue becoming the leader of a rebellion, right? He may or may not succeed. He may ultimately find himself hanging at the end of a rope, right? And that's the story of Vidar, and Del gets to watch the remainder of the Chronicles, right? Or create another character, So that's a fascinating thing. The Dark Age of Man allows those types of things. Vidar could have also said, screw this. I've lost my wife. I don't want to be a Thatcher anymore. I'm going to go down the docks here and I'm going to talk to the fishermen about getting renting a fishing boat, becoming a fisherman. He can become a market. Now the world can happen around him and to him while he's trying to build a fishing business, right? Or get a wagon and take goods from one place to another. Vidar's way of dealing with the famine could have been, I'm going to get a wagon together and a mule, and I'm going to go over to Howardtown and I'm going to procure some food and shit, and I'm gonna bring it back to feed these people. That could have been Vidar's. He becomes an actual trader. He becomes a guy who trades, one thing for another thing, right? And next thing you know, he's dealing with bandits trying to steal his food on the road, right? Or all of it comes from Vidar choosing to become a vendor of foodstuffs, right? Symbaroum still not quite that player facing, right? Anyway. Interesting. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye.